Welcome to She Says with your host, Stephanie Regalado. She Says guests share stories from their challenges to successes and, most importantly, the journey of womanhood woven alongside the collaboration of sisterhood. From self, love, friends and family, to hot topics, career, and world views, Stephanie and her guests discuss matters with utmost openness and honesty. So let's hear what she says. Here's Stephanie.
Hello, welcome to She Says. I'm Stephanie Regalado. I have Colleen Russell with me today. Colleen, you've recently, how long ago has it been?
My book just came out a month ago.
Yes, and it is The Feminine Path to Wholeness, Becoming a Conscious Queen. I love that.
Thank you.
How long has this book been in motion before? I can put it up so people can see.
Well, I have always wanted to write a book since I was in my 30s. And I wanted to write about my story partly because I got pregnant at 17, had a baby at 18, and I wanted to make meaning out of that.
Yeah.
But I had such an inner critic that I could not create it. Mm-hmm. I made a manuscript once, and I ended up burning it after getting some feedback from an agent in New York.
Yes.
And so this last effort has been a 3-year trek of just sitting down on a daily basis, making it sacred time and doing it.
Yeah. What was it about that experience of being such a young mom that you felt compelled to share the story?
Oh, well, it makes your life really confusing. Like, how did I create this? Because when you're 17 or 18, you don't really understand how your actions create life, and you don't have that brain that can tell you that your actions have cause and effect. So I had a lot of confusion. I had a lot of shame. And so there was a part of me that just needed to keep churning that story and making meaning of it. And trying to make sense, like, how did I end up here? And what was the meaning of this for me?
How did your family support you during that time?
Well, my family were very supportive. We were Irish Catholics, however, and so, there was a lot of shame that came with because this was in the 1972 that I got pregnant.
Okay.
But they were very supportive. I didn't get sent off to a home or anything. I was able to stay in school. I was able to finish school. I finished school 7 months pregnant.
Oh.
Unmarried.
Soon
to be a mother.
Soon to be.
Single mother.
This moment with you just took a twist for me because, and I hadn't read that part of your story yet, because my daughter had a baby when she was 16. Is that right? Yes. She was 16.
Okay.
And she's 19 now. And I've always wanted to do something with her about our experience together, and with Isaac, my daughter's Bella, and Isaac, the father, and his mom, Shannon, and all of our families. I'm going to choke up. And how we came together and supported, and it's amazing the difference your path can take when you have support versus when you don't have support. And you hear the statistics about teen parents from the road and how it changes their life, but it doesn't have to be. The statistics don't have to be that way.
I agree.
So I have such a heart for that whole the process. And my grandbaby just turned 3. Oh. And she is the most magnificent creature on the entire planet. And I couldn't imagine her not being here. So.
And what is her name?
Her name is Naya.
Oh,
they call her the Love Nugget or Princess Plum Cake. I have lots of different names for her. But anyway.
Yeah, so you know what that experience is like. It's a bit of a disappointment and a mixed blessing, and then it's a blessing.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and a lot of things are how we view them as well. But I know it takes a long time throughout our lives. You and I were talking about before we started different timelines that you put on your life and goals, and when you don't meet them, how that kind of can be a disappointment. But it's we're moving through the experience.
Right.
Without deadlines that we know of. I mean, we know there's an ultimate deadline.
Right.
And you have trained in a lot of different ways in feminine studies and also in, I think I can say it, Jungian. You're a Jungian analyst. And what is that
So I'm not a Jungian analyst, but I
you are.
studied with Marion Woodman, who was probably in
Was she the one who commented? She's the one who commented here.
No,
Yeah.
she's not the one in the front. But
different. Okay.
she was a very instrumental in writing a lot of books during the 1980s, 1990s that helped women to really come home to themselves. And so she created this body soul leadership training, which used theater and studies to come home to our bodies and to really become fully embodied women. And in that training, you run into your sort of shadow traumas that are left unsaid inside of you, and you really make it conscious so that you become more of a creative container to be able to put things like a book out into the world.
Mm-hmm. It's such a fascinating thought. It's also so fascinating that we are all connected in the same kind of footprint of a story.
Mm-hmm.
And we're all within experiencing a similar search back to ourselves. And when we, as we're growing up, we're looking at, we want to accomplish so many things. There's so many things that are external.
Mm-hmm.
And even with body image and trying to attain something else that we visualize, that we try to create within ourselves. But then the freedom, and there was this, you talk about freedom in this book as well.
I do talk a bit about freedom in the book, because I don't believe that we can be free as women until we really feel free within inside of ourselves. And we think of the patriarch and all of that as outside of ourselves, but a component of that lives within our own head right here.
I think when we really turn the focus most on, because those are the things we can truly control anyway, and the other things can just, without control, or without a sense of control at all, because there are other humans having feelings and thoughts or whatever.
Correct.
It just is, it's maddening, and it just makes you mad. And so, but to be able to truly go inside of yourself and work on, because the most detrimental things to us, I believe, at this stage of my life, are the things that we think and feel about ourselves.
Correct. And I feel like we're the ones that stop all of our dreams if they don't happen. You know, it's our own internal self-talk. And the more we become conscious, and that's why I call it becoming a conscious queen, is the more we become conscious of those inner stories that drive us, the less limited we are by those things.
Absolutely. And I love this quote by Carl Rogers: "The curious paradox is that when I accept myself just as I am, then I can change." I just think that's a beautiful thing. Instead of trying to change yourself into something more acceptable by whatever standards are our own through different ways. But
so a lot of the reason why I wrote the book, Stephanie, was that in the introduction there that Paula Reeves writes, she talks about the three stories that we come in with. And she says, you know, we're born into an external story. So we're born into a geography, a family that has an economic, social background, a country. And so we come with that story, or that story shapes and forms us. And then we have a second story that we create based on the outer critics, the teachers, whatever we learn in life, or the traumas that happen to us, we create a story around that. But then we have the soul story, which is the deeper, wiser, authentic story of ourselves. And that's why I wrote the book, is because I would like all of us as humans to find that deeper, wiser story of the soul.
And that's something that's present before we merge. So
Right.
that's the solid foundational piece.
We all come in with that unique print and those unique gifts that only we can offer.
And how do you advise people to really get down and that deep within themselves? Down and dirty. It can feel dirty when you're uncovering, like you say, the different stories.
I know, and I try to make it less painful in the book, but sometimes finding that inner story is painful, because as we go through life and we run into traumatic places, or we feel like, oh, we can't express ourselves in that way, that goes into hiding inside of us. And when we start inquiring inside of us, we oftentimes run into those unhealed places within ourselves. And so we have to stop and pause and and do what we can to shift the story or understand the story in a little bit different way. But the beauty of that is that underneath of that story that's held in place and taking up space in there, when you heal that, the unlived story, all that unlived potential that you came in to live is underneath of that and gets to expand and being expressed through you.
Yeah, it makes sense. I'm such a visualist, but as you were saying that, I can see that the stories that we created by our experience is actually just like a blanket or a covering of the actual truth and reality deep down inside of us.
And they inform us, and they probably give us part of our gifts or the experiences that we need to express our gifts. You know, a lot of people will say in the psychological field that our gifts are in the wounds, so that when we really look at the wounds, that's why we express certain things. That's why I'm here. That's why I'm here expressing, you know, follow that path because it can free you.
What do you think is the first step in everything that you write about and talk about? I know you speak a lot about sharing our stories, and I'm big on that. My Twitter handles so many stories. So I really, and through the different works that I've done, I feel like there's so much power, and it's the shame breaker and everything when we can just speak our truth and share our stories.
Yeah, and I think the danger of sharing the story is to not get caught up in the story itself and re-loop back into it, but to say, what was the story? Is it all true? How can I make it a healing story so that we move forward in the story and actually find the gift and the benefit that came from those experiences?
There is such a fine line I've discovered, and everyone can see it, I think, between being your truth, authentic self and sharing your story, and also making sure that when you get that there's a point of when to share it. There's
true,
and with the different circles that you have in your life.
True, and who to share it
and
with.
who to share it with. In those earlier moments when you're going through something and you feel chopped up by it, then you lean on the people, those intimate relationships closest to you. But I have a rule that I don't set anything free in any of my writing or the work, or if anyone writes for me a very personal story, until they've come kind of full circle within it, and they can leave the reader uplifted or encouraged at the end. That you don't leave them in a spot where they're chopped up. And in the space of reckoning. And not
so you're not just leaving them in the pain of the transformation, but you actually find the transformational arc, so to speak, of the story and the gift that comes out of that experience is what I hear you saying.
Yes, thank you. That's exactly the truth. What are, through all your studies and coaching women through the years, what are 2 or 3 things that stick out to you most that are true for all women at our core?
Well, part of the reason why I wrote the book is that I feel, you know, worldwide that women's gifts haven't been fully expressed. Because when you think about it, we haven't had the right to vote for 100 years yet, and that's not very long. And then, in addition, we haven't had economic security for very long. Like my generation, your generation, like my mom was a stay-at-home mom, and women weren't that much in the workplace. So for the first time in history, we have the opportunity to choose how to express ourselves and to possibly self-actualize into our own realization of our authentic selves. And even, I don't know that men have had that opportunity because they've been the breadwinners. I think some men have had that opportunity, but I think that's the women, that women have that opportunity right now before them. And that's why I encourage this sort of inner search, because Carl Jung would say, when we marry the inner world with the outer world, so in other words, we're paying attention to almost like the God self, the spiritual self that's inside of us too, and we're letting it inform the outer world, then we become mature humans and we're going to make better choices, I think, for our society. And so I see it as foundational work.
We're going to take a quick break to hear a word from our sponsors, and then we'll come back and talk more about this. And also, I know you share some steps and some advice inside that we'll dig into about for our readers. So we'll be right back after this message.
Thank you.
Hi, this is Larry at River Ridge Hardware. Just wanted the opportunity to show you a little bit about our Christmas. We have Christmas tree stands. We have ornaments that you won't find anywhere else. We have the small Christmas lights. We have the tube lights that you can run up and down. We also have a massive amount of snow shovels. Come on out and visit River Ridge Hardware.
Welcome back to She Says. I'm Stephanie Regalado with Colleen Russell, and we're talking about becoming conscious queens and the feminine path to wholeness. When I was first taking a note a while ago about your book and the project and everything, I said I wrote down a feminine path to wellness.
Oh.
And I thought, you know what? It can work as well. And wellness, we have to have this wholeness really to have the wellness.
Right.
And before the break, we talked about ways that women can start on this journey. And what are some of the most, because sometimes you're looking at your life, and we still, while we're doing this self-exploration, a lot of women have other things pulling at their time.
Of course.
Parents and relationships,
Yes.
spouses, children perhaps, or other relatives, and work. A lot of us are working.
Yes.
And household duties and so many things that are pulling at us and can take up our time. And it's so easy to put it off for another day or the end of the day, or to wake up early and miss that first alarm and just put it off, speaking from grand experience in that area. So when you're looking at all that and you're trying to, like, where does a woman begin?
Well, that's a great question, Stephanie, and I think that's why it doesn't often happen for women until about midlife. It's because their kids are raised and the family is leaving home, and so there's natural changes that are taking place that are mixing up the pattern of what was. And often the path to wholeness, the feminine path to wholeness, comes when we're in some kind of a life crisis. So if we want to proactively seek it, what we do is we make sure that we make time to maybe take a retreat every once in a while and just kind of search inward. Otherwise, I think life is going to bring you to it. And I think your response to when life brings you to it is whether it will bring you the fruits of your labor or not. So if you answer the call with, I'm going to dive deeply into this and explore it and find out what this all means to me, if I look for the deeper meaning and purpose in something, then I'm going to find some of the things that I talk about in the feminine path to wholeness. If I don't look at it and I just see it as an event and I let it pass by and I remain bitter, and then we shorten our lives and we live more contracted lives in a way. So the invitation is to open when these places in your life come and to see it as a spiritual call, calling you to a larger self.
Oh, I like that visualization of it. I was in church a couple of weeks ago, and the pastor said that when you go to pray, that's the second step in the series, that there's actually the pull to pray. And I love thinking of it in that way. When we finally, just like you said, if we're not going to actualize it, if we're not going to be proactive about it, we will get there. And
life will bring it to you.
Life will bring it to you. And I know I have so many friends who our identities are made up in everything that we do. Because we put stories about importance and worth, and particularly how we care for others. Right. Because women are amazing caregivers. And then your children start needing you a little less, or they do this horrific thing where they leave they leave the house for all those grand adventures you set them up to be successful at, and suddenly you wonder, who am I?
Correct.
And so maybe that's the reckoning, the midlife reckoning.
That is, and when you get to the question of who am I, then you have to go searching for that if you really want an answer to that. And that's so true, is that what happens is life takes its course, and all those identities that formed who you were are now dropping by the wayside. And so there's a void where you say, who am I? And oftentimes that void is painful, and we cry and we, scream and holler like, what? And we try to find our way. And so why I wrote this book is because I didn't think that there was that many guidebooks for people that are going through crisis moments to say, hey, this is deeper. and more precious than what it looks like on the surface.
I love that you have some recommendations in the book, Artful Play, and the dolls, the paper dolls.
Right.
Because I think art is such a beautiful way to, it's one way that I can I guess, stop listening to all the other noise that I have in my life. When I was talking about painting with my younger daughter with friends, they're like, oh, I bet that's just amazing. You guys have all these conversations. I said, no, we don't actually even have much of conversation but we're both we're beside one another in creation mode. And it just feels so spiritual, and especially when you can witness someone else not hesitating necessarily on their expression.
Right.
A long time ago, I was an executive director of a nonprofit, and we had an art therapy program with mandalas. And one of the gals, Jeannie, who was running it, she said she went downtown to one of the women's groups. There were a lot of homeless women that would pop in for the day there. And she said a lot of them couldn't even choose one color. They didn't even know. You could draw your own mandala or whatever, but she would hand them out, and they needed help knowing which color to use because they had resisted so much and held so much and not believed in their worth. But that you can see that on so many levels in everyone's life.
Right, because that creation of what you're creating, like the mandalas, is also symbolic of whatever else you want to create in your life, or however you want to author or story your own life, is you're going to run into those blocks, as you're saying that
just even showing up for the day.
Yeah.
We have those blocks.
Yeah, and I think one of the big things for women is there's a lot of self-loathing that comes with being a woman. And I think that comes from history and our bodies and our sexuality and all of these things just either being very problematic or being shunned or shamed or whatever.
Yeah, absolutely. And how do we, I really believe we support one another. I know there's a lot of solo journeying involved, but I also truly believe in the sisterhood of women coming together and supporting one another.
Yes.
And I think that we can abolish so much of the shame and the things that hold us back just by stepping and letting go and having that freedom to understand that people are either going to be okay with you or not okay with you.
Yeah.
And both of those options are perfectly fine.
But I also think, it's really important if you're going to share your story and share the things that you feel less than happy about, or the choices that you made that you feel challenged about, that you really find someone that you can trust. Because you can tell your story to someone who then creates more havoc for you because they don't know how to hold it. And so I believe that you really need to find someone who can trust and witness without judgment, and that probably has done similar work themselves, so that they also hold that within themselves. And when someone else holds it, you know that, and your body knows that.
And then there's safety.
Correct.
In that. And it really is something that you can fine tune over time, or maybe I think that we all had it, and then it was just kind of smothered out in us over time, our intuitions. And I can look back and understand when I started not stepping forward and expressing something.
Right.
And it started with a man that was a family member who I did not feel comfortable with. I didn't like how he interacted with my mom, and I was told I was being disrespectful, and I needed to be nice to him and everything. Well, then my mom leaves my dad for this man, and then I see she's in a relationship with him, and I see similar things. But anyway, so I've just realized that those are our truths that we can stand by, but through, like you're saying, those external corrections and teachers about we need to be respectful, we need to be polite, we need to not trust that inner voice, instead of helping us fine-tune ways to express it and feel safe with who you share it with. But within on all that, I'm blabbering on, you start to really see who cares because they like information and want information, and who cares because they truly just care about the core of you.
Right. And I think that's more of a rarity that I don't know that we've come into wholeness yet, where we can really hold and support each other necessarily, even in our families, because we want to look good on the outside, and there's all these societal things that are important, and sometimes if you violate them, there are a lot of repercussions that can happen, and it is harmful and it is dangerous. So there's a balance of how do I support my children in following and trusting their own intuition, and also guiding them in the safety when they don't have all the knowledge and wisdom to go with that. And
now we're starting to run out of time, but it's just really blowing up at me, the Me Too movement, and especially during the Kavanaugh hearings when it came out, why wouldn't a woman share what happened to her? Why would a woman share this long? And I think it was hardest for me to see other women questioning that. I was grateful in a way for them that they didn't understand it, but it's just so hard sometimes to come together. I don't even know how to bridge those gaps.
But I write in my book, is I couldn't tell my mom about getting a bra. A neighbor, a woman at a clerk at a store helped me with my first bra. My mom did not tell us about a period. So do you think I'm going to come talk to her about some wild sexual experience that I have at 16 or 17? Yeah. I'm not.
Right. That's such a good point. Because so many families still have awkward conversations or no conversations at all about our sexuality.
Right.
Or even drugs. Sometimes drugs and alcohol are much easier to discuss because it seems external and out there, and we can just talk about that bad thing there. But when you're trying to embrace sexuality and how to
and mix that sexuality with drugs and alcohol.
Yes, exactly. So, I don't know. I would personally, my goal moving forward is how to bridge those gaps with women who I don't feel as though they're as soft a place to land as they'd like to project they are. When I saw them sharing memes about Dr. Ford and someone hugging her and saying, "I'm so sorry that man did such horrible things to you 35 years ago, or such horrible things to you. It took you 35 years to talk about it." Exactly.
Right.
I don't know how to break through all that.
I think patience.
Yeah.
I think we just have to be patient, and with education and awareness. But a bridge is what we most definitely need, right?
Well, and like we started this conversation with, so many things are out of our control externally, and when I start feeling that way, I really only can fall back on becoming whole, because I think that's a lifelong journey. I don't know that we ever necessarily arrive at a certain destination. I think it's a continuous
I agree.
project. Before we close off, do you have any other advice for readers? Who is this book perfect for one?
Well, the book was written for middle-aged women primarily. And
what is middle-aged these days?
Okay, well, what is middle-aged? I turned middle-aged at 36 because I had my child so young that my son left home when I was 36.
Oh, okay.
And then at the same time, my first husband died at that same age, and I was thrown into this major transition. So it can happen at any age, but I would say, 40s above.
Okay.
And what I'm finding is people are buying it for their friends, their family, members, anybody they can think of. And some people have told me you need to take it to colleges and educate young women, because I don't know that they know about the history of women. I don't know that they understand the deep challenges we have around sexuality, around what it's meant to be a woman in our culture, and have had discussions about that. Yet they're running into it every day on their campuses and in their lives.
Yeah, absolutely. How can people find your book?
Well, the book is available locally here at Auntie's bookstore. It is also in the Well-Read Moose in the Coeur d'Alene area, and it's in the Inquire Within in Sandpoint, as well as Northwest Handmade. And they can also go to Amazon and just plug in The Feminine Path to Wholeness and find it there.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much
for
putting your lifetime into this book
and
setting it free out into the world. There's so many great nuggets, and it's beautiful as well, because your own art
Right. I
throughout
illustrated it as well.
Yeah, so you put a lot of
And not
heart
purposefully. I was doing the art, and it just sort of married the words and allowed me to write the book.
Well, that's perfect. Thank you so much, Colleen.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next time.
She Says is produced in Spokane, Washington by SpokaneTalksOnline.com, which is solely responsible for its content.